Okay, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the session From Risk to Resilience, Navigating Cybersecurity, Data, and AI. Next slide. So my name, if we can just move to the next slide, Jesse.
Yeah, sorry, Sheila, I
Yeah,
had
this slide.
your, yeah, okay.
Oh, what? Yeah. So my name's Sheila Smigorowski, and I'm one of the community ambassadors, and I'll be your host for the session today on this part of things. I'm currently a chair at McDougall House Association and one of the community ambassadors. So we'll start with our land acknowledgement. So Amiskwaciwâskahikan, or Edmonton, is situated on Indigenous land in Treaty 6 territory. We acknowledge the language, culture, and heritage of the Nehihau Cree, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Nitsisapi, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, Nakota Sioux peoples. Their histories and cultures continue to influence our community to this day. Okay, next slide. Next slide. I think it's going in the wrong direction. Yeah, this one. Okay, so just really want to thank our panel for today, who are going to be presenting to you. And I'm going to introduce Jesse Hill, who's of Tier 3 IT Solutions, and he will be moderating our session for today. We're going to have presentations from all our panelists, and then time permitting, we will have some Q&A and some closing comments from us, and we'll try to have you on your way by 1 o'clock today. Just a reminder, we will be doing a draw with nonprofits, so please put your name, which you registered with, and the nonprofit that you are affiliated with in your labeling, just for purposes of that prize. And it will be one opportunity per organization in our draw. Thank you very much. And over to you, Jesse. So Jesse Hill, I'm just going to do a very brief intro and he can tell you more about himself. He's the president with Tier 3 IT Solutions, 25 years in IT, leads a team of 20 plus IT professionals, serves thousands of users, and donates 2% of his revenues annually to nonprofits and charities. Okay, over to you, Jesse.
Thanks, Sheila, and thanks everybody for joining us today. And we were commenting before we started the session that isn't it appropriate that today is Giving Tuesday, and I appreciate the opportunity to partner with the CPA ambassadors and all the nonprofits here. As Sheila mentioned, we've got a giant prize wheel loaded up and ready to go, and we'll do a draw at the end for the donation that you had heard about. So today we have a couple of experts joining us to talk about this whole topic, going from risk to resilience, and we're going to be touching on cybersecurity, AI, data protections, insurance, risk management. And we want to make this interactive and engaging. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, and actually I will also try to get you the link into the chat. But if you wouldn't mind getting your phone out and scanning the QR code that we have up on the screen here, and just quickly running through and sharing your perspectives and insights on the questions that we've got there, and we will discuss them a little bit further down the line. So I'll get that link and load it up so that you can click on it if that's easier. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce Steve Wilkinghoff. He'll tell you a little bit more about himself, but the reason that I have collaborated with Steve and appreciate bringing him on to panels like this is that there's a lot of talk in the market about AI right now, but there's not a lot of people who are actually doing AI, meaning designing, planning, implementing and executing on AI development plans. Steve is one of those people who has actually successfully deployed some of these things. So Steve, thanks for joining us, and please take it away.
Thanks, Jesse. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'll set my timer because we've got a lot to cover. Trying to cover off in 12 to 13 minutes some impactful information we can have around AI in your nonprofit. Briefly, a little bit about my background. I've got over 25 years in finance, AI, and analytics. I started my career back when chartered accountants were chartered accountants, and then into a CPA. Ended up building a firm and merging it with one of the nationals, and then ended up writing a book on profitability analytics, and that got me into doing deeper analytics and ultimately AI inside private equity firms in the UK. As an aside, I'm glad that we're all here. I think CPAs are actually going to own the future of AI and analytics because it's such a wonderful base to be in the space and understand things. I have a huge passion for nonprofits, and these days, don't do accounting anymore. My company provides back office automation and AI implementation, which is what I'll be talking about today in the next little bit. So next slide, please, Jesse. So I want to start off by, framing it. AI is such a huge topic. We all hear so much about AI, and we're kind of led to believe, it's going to transform our organizations, whether it's a nonprofit or a profit enterprise. AI is the big thing. It's going to change how we do things. It's going to change what we do. It's going to change how we work. And there's all this promise and sunshine and rainbows, and it's all fantastic. But as you see on the next slide, it's actually not like that in the day-to-day. So if you jump to the next slide, this is more what, when I'm talking to nonprofits, when I'm talking to organizations, I'm talking to leaders, this is what AI feels like, right? It's such a big, complex area. It's hard to figure out what are the first steps, how do we connect this piece to that piece. And because of that feeling of this cacophony of noise and chaos in the ground or on the ground in our organizations, there's a tendency often for us to defer or procrastinate, right? We know AI is going to be big. We know we should be doing something around AI. We know we should be using AI. But as organizational leaders, how do we actually take those first steps? And how do we manipulate AI to our advantage? And what we're going to find today is my approach, talking for you guys in 12 minutes, 13 minutes, it's really, I want to leave you with these 4 steps, and then I'm going to talk to some concrete examples and then have your 4 takeaways. It's about all we can cover in the time we have allotted. So the first part of quieting all that noise, that cacophony, is to take a deep breath and literally, kind of zen out a little bit and realize that there's a process to succeeding with AI. And the process I've seen and used over and over again, it boils down to these 4 steps. The first one is realize it's about AIA. And you'll hear me often, almost always try to talk about AIA whenever we talk about AI. And that's because the second A is automation. What I find with AI is because there's so many different things it can mean to people, when we try to bring it inside our organizations, the AI, the artificial intelligence, if we're actually going to use it in the day-to-day, the odds are we're going to be using AI to do some good automations that actually transform our workflows. And by taking that perspective of AIA, you'll instantly find it takes the universe of things you could be doing and narrows it down. The second step is realize AIA it's a journey, not a destination, right? It's not something we acquire. It's not something we do. It's not something we install in our organizations and then it's done, but rather it's a process. It's a journey. The third step, because it is a journey, means that as organizational leaders in our nonprofits, we really need to commit to taking that journey. And commit is a big word in this third step. Because it's a journey, that means it's going to take time. months, years, not months and years to see results. You can see results almost instantaneously, but it's a long-term journey. It's a journey that really never ends. And along the way, when you implement AI on a small basis, like I suggest, and you'll see in the examples, they compound and build off of each other. And over 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, you'll end up much further along. However, be aware, not every step you take on your AIA journey is going to be a success, right? Some will work fantastic. Some will not work at all and do what we thought. Some will kind of not give us much benefit at all. So the key is keeping things small and reducing the risk so we're not betting the farm on it, so to speak, and making these big bets. And that leads us into that fourth step. Always think steps along this journey, not leaps, right? It's a series of small steps we're always trying to do. Even if you're automating and using AI in one small little piece of your organization, once it's done and functioning, that's now done. And then you do the next small step and the next small, and they compound over time. And what you'll find is, as a leader, if you take that approach in your organization, 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road, you're actually going to have a fairly strong basis in AIA, and you're going to look around and be like, look at all the things we're using AI and automation for. And often your competitors or other organizations who don't take that approach are stuck still trying to figure out what the big steps are. So those are the 4 steps. And the examples I'm about to give you are purposely meant to be small and discrete, and they'll seem almost too simple in some cases, but that's the whole idea behind those 4 steps to succeeding with AIA. And remember, we're taking steps, not leaps. All 3 of these are in nonprofits I've worked with and implemented these things, so I know firsthand these little examples I'm going to talk about. So the first one, let's jump into that, Jesse. It's what I call program demographics on demand. And in this case, it's a nonprofit in New York State and in the US, obviously. And they had a relatively new CEO came in, and she was quite aggressive and wanted to get quite aggressive on going and finding new funders and making a whole bunch more asks, and in particular, make them very relevant to them, to the funders. In particular, this CEO, her vision was, gee, it would be great if we're dealing with a certain clients and we're serving 800 clients in a certain postcode, I can go to the banks in that area and tell them, look, specifically, here's the impact we're having in your postcode. That's why you should fund, because we're helping your neighborhood and your clients. Of course, when the CEO first came on, that was very difficult. As you can imagine, the demographic data was all there. It was just in different systems and different program manager spreadsheets. And so the simple step was actually to literally automate pulling the data from those spreadsheets, whether they were living in SharePoint or a box folder. It was SharePoint in their case. And then once it was pulled into a single place, to just put AI chat. And when I'm talking about AI here, I should make the point. These are off-the-shelf AI tools. Remember, my thing is about implementing AI. So I'm not someone to invent an AI model. I'm going to help, and my viewpoint is always companies should use what's available. So it was off the shelf. It was AI available through Microsoft, so that on the fly, the CEO could ask, how many people does program A serve in this postcode, and have the answer. And it's actually quite funny. And this particular CEO, even now, has gone on speaking and about how this has transformed their particular nonprofit. They'll often post on LinkedIn, and I've seen her at networking parties actually call up on her phone. She's like, "Hey, watch this!" It's like a party trick, and she'll punch in things and pull up, what's your postcode, and do you know we serve people here? So again, very simple, but very powerful. So the next example on the next slide is, it's dear to everyone's heart on here, I'm sure, and this was a different nonprofit, like almost every nonprofit. When it came to doing annual reporting and things, it was a number of weeks to pull together the right data and build it into the different reports and the charts and the tables that they wanted. And again, it's because some of the data was in a CRM, some was in an accounting system, some was in donor management, some was in program manager spreadsheets. And so there would be all these emails flying around and people sending spreadsheets back and forth. And then someone was assembling the spreadsheets and then trying to, manipulate with pivot tables. And again, it took weeks. Very similar to the previous one, just automated pulling all that data from those different systems, whether it was CSV files or Excel files, pulling into one place. And so that information was now available. Instead of weeks, it was literally available in a few hours. What was really cool about that was if you think about all that information that would go into an annual report, that's fantastic information for new funding requests or to use for touching base with our donors throughout the year or giving program metrics. And so because it was now available automatically, they could actually use that information instead of only annually and it being a pain where. They actually use that in the regular communication cadence, and they would use it for new grant applications, new program funding applications throughout, because it was just so available now. So again, very simple on the face of it. We'd almost think that's not AI and automation, but it actually is, and it was transformative. So the third example I want to leave you with, and again, these are simple examples. My goal, you'll see when we get to your 4 takeaways, I want you to get thinking about what are the small things we can do. So this one, automated meeting summaries and actions, a lot of organizations are doing this now. But as you can expect, we'd have meetings and Teams meetings, and then it was someone's job to summarize those and, make sure we have proper minutes. Because again, we have governance issues, both charitable and nonprofit, and to our boards and donors, everything was documented clearly, as we all know. So there was someone who was summarizing that. There was also what I call risky chat GPT usage, and risky in the sense that it was ungoverned, right? And sometimes people were putting their summary into chat GPT and saying, can you summarize this nice and neatly and find the action steps in there? All good. And yes, I know you can buy paid chat GPT subscriptions that won't send the data out. But, from a nonprofit perspective, there's a whole bunch of governance issues if you're using ChatGPT versus bringing ChatGPT to your data. So this was all going on. So their solution was, now in the Teams meeting are there, they're all getting recorded. The minute that meeting is over, they have an automation in place that transcribes that meeting recording into a text-based summary. Then another AI tool, again, on the Microsoft stack, so off-the-shelf pieces, then takes that, summarizes it into the key relevant decision things, the action steps that need to be taken, who's responsible for each one, and then it gets sent out to all the participants and also gets stored into SharePoint so it can be accessed perfectly. So again, very simple one. So the last slide, I know I'm going fast because I now want to leave you with these action steps. So your AIA, your automation and AI takeaways after this is, remember, AIA is the key. It's not just AI. And then in your organizations, when you next get the chance with your team, identify the specific tasks that are manual in your organization, then map out what steps you're actually doing in those tasks and figure out where all the manual steps live. And then just pick one, remember that journey, and start taking steps down to experimenting and figuring out how you can automate even a small piece of that. So I covered a lot fast. That is the end of my AIA presentation to you guys. We can talk more in Q&A after.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. And I want to just slide this over, make sure, yeah, we can see it. Perfect. So from the poll, we had 79 people respond, and half of the attendees today are saying they're not using AI yet. We've got about a third that are piloting it, and then, the rest are just trying to figure out, well, I suppose some of them are using it regularly. So more than half aren't leveraging AI quite yet. So It's again part of the reason I appreciated having Steve on here, because he has implemented these solutions. And if you're looking to kick something like this off, we'll have contact info at the end so we chat a little further. So thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. I'm going to pop in and talk a little bit about the cybersecurity side of things. And I thought it was interesting. The feedback that we got, of course, we've got the word cloud here. We can see a lot of concerns around cybersecurity, phishing, data breaches, the types of issues that every business is dealing with, to be frank. A lot of concern, private financial information that you need to protect. We've got donors and volunteer and human resource information. And then our top threats. And I appreciate that the folks attending did identify phishing and social engineering as being a primary threat, because the reality is that our people are our weakest link when it comes to cybersecurity. So the reason that thinking about cybersecurity really matters for nonprofits today. Right. Sorry. Before I get into that, introduce myself just a little bit more. Sheila did a good job at the beginning. So my name is Jesse Hill. I'm the president at Tier 3 IT Solutions. You can see some of our stats on here. Again, as Steve mentioned, we really appreciate nonprofits. We work with a number of them. We find ways to support them both through financial and donations and all of those types of things, and appreciate all the good work that you do in here. One of the things that I tell people whenever I'm giving a talk is this line here, that we've been tested and proven. And what I mean by that is that back in 2021, there was a pretty significant cyber incident that occurred in a piece of software that IT management companies like us use to serve their clients. And that incident, that event, it impacted many organizations like ours, and it proved to us that the systems and the tools and the methods that we had in place actually did work and protected our clients against significant impact. So I can tell you a whole story about all of those things, but we'll move on and talk about you and your organizations today. So the thing about cyber risks, and the reason that we think that it's important to continuously talk about this, is that smaller organizations, and when I say smaller, I mean organizations with fewer than 500 employees, often are bigger cyber risk targets than enterprise organizations. And it's not because we have more resources to steal or take advantage of, but it's typically that we don't have the same budgets, we don't have the same teams of people that a large organization might have, and at the same time, you still have very important information. When we think about many of the nonprofits that have joined us today, you've got your donors, you've got your clients, you've got your employees. And all of that information has value to people, cyber criminals that want access to it. They've also found ways to impact operations through, malware, ransomware, denial of service attacks, all of those types of kind of more advanced types of threats. But as we saw in the poll, the number one threat vector that most organizations need to deal with is phishing, business email compromise, impersonation, and truthfully, insider threats. And that's one I think that is often overlooked, particularly in nonprofits where we have a lot of volunteers and people that are kind of mission driven, more so than being vetted the same way we might for an employee. So there is a definite need to be making sure that you've got some of those enhanced defenses in place, and you'll hear the more that we engage, and hopefully we have some other conversations, that we're going to talk less about tools and more about, policies and process and, education and those types of things. We always point out, and Adam will be able to attest to this as well, that they call it cybercrime for a reason. I mean, you can see all the bullet points on here, but the reality is that many of the cyber threats that our organizations face, they are well orchestrated, well funded criminal organizations. And when we say organizations, we mean large structured organizations with org charts and departments and roles and responsibilities and targets and metrics. And so they are very opportunistic in that, they don't really care whether you're a nonprofit or not. This is not a cyber incident that occurred, but I'm sitting in Leduc right now, and just this weekend, the Leduc Santa's helpers had their storage facility broken into, and half of the toys for their auction got stolen. And you just go, my goodness, do they have no morals or ethics? And they don't. They are criminals. They are looking for ways to make money. And they go in cybercrime, much like in physical, real world crime, they are crimes of opportunity. So there is no such thing as a 100% cyber secure business. However, we can all position ourselves so that we are more secure than our peers and our, in the corporate world, maybe community. One of the things that we see in working with our nonprofit clients that does make it a little bit challenging is, rightfully so, you folks want to maximize the amount of money that's going, from your donors to your mission, to your cause. And so that often means that the budget that you might, need around the technology side of things may not be available, or around the insurance, or around AI. And so there's that constant tug of war between what you want to do and what you can do. We talked a little bit about that volunteer reliance, and I would really just stress and encourage you, as you are screening people for your team, that you want to think about what kind of access they're going to have, and make sure that you have proper controls, that you vetted them, that you know before you give them access to technology, that you can trust them. Legacy systems, we don't need to worry too much about that. Just, it's important to know if you've put off updates, if you've put off replacements, you may have preserved some of your capital, but you may be in a position of technical debt. So a good example of this would be just a month and a half ago, Windows 10 support ended, which means you can no longer get critical updates and security updates, and you may have gaps in that. And the challenge, the bottom one here, is about really getting the board, to participate, to appreciate that investing in enhancing your cybersecurity actually protects your mission. It helps to build and establish and maintain trust in the community as well. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I think Adam will do a better job talking about insurance matters. This is data that's pulled from Coalition. You can see the metrics I put in. I pretended this was a 25-person nonprofit, with $2 million of annual revenue. And through their calculations of actual claims that have been processed, they can show you what the median 1 in 10 year and 1 in 100 year loss probabilities may look like. And I think we can all agree that it's fairly significant when we think about the impact that it has on the organization. Now, this is one of my, I would say, all-time favorite statements around cybersecurity. And I mean, you can all read, but cybersecurity is not a product you install. It is a practice you instill. So what this means is we need to be thinking about a cybersecurity plan that is based around planning, people, processes, products, partnerships, policies. And this last one here, I think, is really important, is about proactivity. We all know somebody who has had their house broken into and then they got an alarm. Well, in the case of an organization that has, to maintain that trust in the community and keep their mission going, is that really wise? Or should we be thinking about measuring, analyzing these risks ahead of time and coming up with a proactive plan? And the reason I love this statement, that it's not a product you install, is to think about it this way. Every single person on this call can walk into a grocery store, and we can all go in with a list and we can buy all of the ingredients that we would need to bake a cake, as an example. And this is the same as when you're in the technology space. Every IT company has access to the same ingredients: antivirus and firewalls and backups and all of those types of things. But much like the ingredients that we take home, depending on your ability and expertise and knowledge and experience and all of those types of things, you might be able to create a really great looking cake like that. Or you may not have all of the same capacity. And so you end up with something that is drastically different, even though you started with the same or similar ingredients. The reason I point this out is that, going back to, it's a practice, not a product. Buying a new thing isn't going to solve your cybersecurity, problems. But the policies and the processes and people and all those other things we talked about will. Now, like Steve, I want to make sure we have time for any Q&A, so we'll kind of blast through this a little bit. But I always point out as well that security and convenience, on one of these scales, they have an inverse relationship. So the more security we put in place, the lower our convenience, the less easy it is to access things. If we make it more convenient, then we will, lose security. Much like putting locks on our doors in our homes and using keypads to get into buildings and key cards and all of those types of things. And your organization, although it is under the umbrella of a nonprofit, has different needs and expectations than another nonprofit organization. So there's a balance that needs to be struck that works for you. And this last point, again, I frequently pointed out, is that the challenging part in cybersecurity is that you and we need to be right every time, every day. The criminals only need to get it right once. And so that is, very challenging for us, generally, that we all recognize that one person makes one mistake and it can cause, a bigger issue. Now, we often hear, when we talk about cybersecurity, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we put MFA on last year, so we're good." And what I want to point out again about kind of the it's a practice, is that there's cybersecurity frameworks out there. This one is called the CIS controls. And if we think about MFA, right, multi-factor authentication, we can see there's actually 3 different recommendations of the types of multi-factor authentication you should use. However, the question about do you have MFA enabled isn't really about do you have MFA. It's about, have you done the 5 things that are baseline minimums for what we call access control. And that would include the other items at the top. So if you're just starting off on your cybersecurity journey, it's not about turning on MFA. It's about doing these first 5 things. If you're a little bit further in your journey, you'd add the next 2. And if you are very mature, you would want to do all 8 of them. And again, it's not about multi-factor authentication. It's about a holistic practice called access control management. All right. So If you've got your your phone out, I do want to just encourage folks as well. Steve wrote a book called The Data-Driven Nonprofit. And in honor of it being Giving Tuesday today, again, we've got just this QR code here. I'll put the link in the chat as well. However, fill this out. And I'd love to connect with you and have a conversation about AI or cybersecurity in business. And at the end of the first quarter of 2026, once we've had a chance to meet with a bunch of you, we will spin the wheel again, and we'll have some additional donations that we'd like to share. And then the last thing I wanted to share for those of you that are in Edmonton. We are partnered as well with the Edmonton Chamber of Voluntary Organizations. And on January 27th, we are running a live in-person cybersecurity and incident response training workshop. And this is basically a half day. We're going to teach you and your team about some of the cybersecurity frameworks and educational items you might need to know. And then we're going to run you through a live incident simulation where you and your team will have to make decisions about how you would respond to an active threat on the technology side of your business. So I'll share the links again in the chat. Hopefully you all can attend, and I appreciate you listening. I'm going to turn it over to Adam so that we can learn a little bit more about managing cyber risk and how insurance may play a part in that.
Thanks, Jesse. Hey everyone, I'm Adam Lafreniere. And if you thought that AI implementation and IT cybersecurity services were dry topics, then buckle up because we're here to talk about insurance. I'm joking, of course. Steve and Jesse, you guys did a great job. Jokes aside, we all know that technology is essential for business, whether it's, in your guys' case, donor management, financial reporting, volunteer coordination, patient information in some cases. They all come with exposure to cyber threats. But today I want to talk to you about why insurance isn't just a financial safety net, it's a strategic risk management tool to protect your board, your organization, and the mission. But why should you listen to me? Is it because I'm a senior advisor at Navacord? I've spent 16 years in insurance and risk. Not really. There's lots of insurance people out there. Is it because of all this alphabet soup you see under my name? I have spent a good deal of time nerding out on the intricacies of insurance and risk. And I could go on and on about coverages and how they work and what interesting things are happening with the insurance companies. But that's not why I'm here. The reason that I feel that there's some value in sharing my experience with you is because in my previous world, I was the one who got the call at 11 p.m. from the CFO telling me that we just found that we've been hit. We don't know how bad it is, and asking me, what do we do next? And as a risk manager in a large company, I saw firsthand the difference that proactive risk management, the support of a good insurance company, and competent IT service providers can bring when you're trying to figure out what went wrong, how bad is it, and how do we get out of it. On a personal side, I'm a dad of 3 kids, and they're all under 9 years old, and I'm currently finishing my MBA program in community economic development at Cape Breton University. And that's where I really developed my love for the social economy and all of the amazing things that are happening in the nonprofit sector. Next slide. So nonprofits, large and small, are increasingly targeted by cyber criminals. There's a lot of sensitive donor data, financial data, patient data, and nonprofits, as we know, operate on slim budgets, and the criminals know this. And that makes them a prime target for the things that Jesse was talking about: phishing, ransomware, other types of data breaches. Cyber insurance acts as a strategic safety net where it protects the business continuity, helps sustain trust, and ensures the ability to comply with regulations after an incident. Those all cost money, and generally nonprofit organizations don't have a slush fund set aside to cover those kinds of costs. It's not just about covering the financial losses. It's about enabling the organizations to recover quickly and keep serving the community. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about cyber risk, a single incident has the ability to disrupt operations, damage trust, and cost thousands of dollars in recovery. And this is all before getting to the point of being sued for possibly having done something wrong. This is all just first-party costs from figuring out what went wrong. And just to elaborate on some of the numbers that Jesse had provided, so one of our partners, Coalition, tracks their claims data, and it shows that in the nonprofit sector, 110,000 is the average cost of a cyber breach, or an investigation for a cyber breach. Things like funds transfer, ransomware, and the big one has become business email compromise. And I'll have an example of it later, but this has become a very big problem that is causing a lot of organizations to lose a good deal of money. Next slide, please. So why insurance matters. Cyber insurance isn't just about paying claims, it's about the resilience. So it covers first-party response costs like your IT forensics, legal fees for a breach coach, public relations. It can also cover business interruption, so loss of revenue, and even sometimes regulatory fines. Cybercrime is an extension that you can put onto your cyber insurance that bridges the gap between your traditional crime coverages that focus on the loss of physical money, robbery type loss, and the cyber insurance that focus on the recovery expenses. So we'll come back to that, but that's something that's often missed in cyber insurance placements. Cyber insurance isn't a replacement for Jesse and IT services. It should be viewed as a complement to any cybersecurity measures that you're using. Even the best IT systems can't guarantee zero risk. And so there's always a chance that something gets through or something happens. And insurance fills the gap for organizations that don't have that slush fund, that resources set aside to fund a response to an incident. One of the biggest misconceptions I hear is that we're too small to be targeted. And this was true 10 to 15 years ago. Threat actors went after big fish, so they would try to get into big organizations and they would ask for big dollars. But especially recently with the adoption of AI, it does a lot to increase productivity for business, but it's also doing a lot to increase productivity for threat actors. So it's making it easier for them to spoof emails. It's making it easier for them to attack organizations because they can build tools that do it automatically. Let's go next slide. So some practical takeaways from the insurance perspective. Well, I guess I put first is review your cyber policy, but first is have a cyber policy. Almost every organization will benefit from it. The cost benefit on it is almost always there. But after you have the policy, the next thing is to review it annually. Insurance is cyclical. It's on an annual renewal. And it's really easy to just get the piece of paper, send in your premium payment, and go on with your life. But technology and threats evolve very quickly, and organizations' business operations change continuously. And so having that ongoing conversation with your broker is very important to make sure that everything that you do is going to be captured in the coverage that you're buying. Common gaps that we see is no coverage for social engineering fraud. So again, on that kind of cyber crime side, it's not automatically included in every policy. And so knowing that that is something to look for, with business email compromise becoming the largest segment of claims, it's really important that having funds extracted from your business, either through invoice manipulation or through CEO spoofing, is very important. And then third-party vendor risk. So if anybody has access to your systems, if anybody has login credentials that are outside of your company, it's very important to make sure that you're managing that risk. Second is to work with your broker to find a cyber insurance company that's providing more value outside of just a potential financial reimbursement after a claim. Cyber is one area where insurance companies are very keen to provide risk assessments, prevention tools, incident investigation services if you think that you might have had a breach before even submitting a claim. Those types of services can add a ton of value in products that you pay the same price for as anything else. So having that conversation, saying, what do I have access to, especially for groups that are not at the scale where they have large in-house IT and maybe an in-house cybersecurity team. And then last is making sure that your limits align with your business needs. Limits and coverage, that is. So the things like the type of data that you hold, the size of your organization, either by revenue, employee count, and the maturity of your IT department can all play a factor in the amount of coverage that you should have. And so trying to figure out what's a reasonable limit and sublimit for certain coverages is important so that you're not spending more than you need to, but you're also protecting everything that you need. And these steps will help you move from a reactive position to a proactive risk management position. Next slide. And so to elaborate on the last point, most brokers will have a partner that does risk assessments. I've provided an anonymized version of one of ours here. We use a company called CyberRight at Navacord, and we've partnered with them, and they give us a 20-page-ish report that shows the outward-facing risk of any company that's live online. So we give them the the web address, and then they have an AI-enabled system that goes and it doesn't do any penetration testing, but it looks at everything that your websites are showing externally. And it's all the same things that a threat actor would be able to see. And then it gives a score. So in this example, this group is actually scoring below the industry median. So they're actually worse than their peers. And it gives a calculation for how that's going to affect their probability of a loss. And then it also breaks down by the different lines of insurance coverage that are available, what it thinks the limit should be. And so when we talk about in the previous slide, saying we have to look at what's appropriate for the business, it's going to be different for every business. And this is a really great start. So in this case, their estimated aggregate loss is 551. So that's where we'd start to have a conversation about where we should be landing on the insurance limits. And so real world examples, I'll just run through this in 30 seconds here so we can get to some questions and answers. But CEO fraud, that's that business email engineering. A CEO had his email compromised. The criminals waited inside the system. They had access to it, and they waited and watched his schedule until he went on vacation. And then they used that as an opportunity to send invoice requests to the finance team. And knowing that he wouldn't be watching his email as closely, they were able to extract invoice payments. And that was a $48,000 loss that was covered outside of deductible for the company. Privacy breaches, an educational institution suspected a former employee may have accessed data of students and employees. And the insurance company was able to deploy forensics and look at the system, and it was proven that there was no exfiltration of data, but there was $25,000 in investigation costs that were covered under the policy. And then dependent business interruption. This one's interesting because the right cyber product can cover if you're reliant on someone else's product. So if you're reliant, if your business is reliant on a software product, and it goes down from an attack, then cyber insurance policies can respond to that as well. And Jesse, I think that's where I'll.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And you know, that's an interesting one to kind of close out on that last thought there. You know, because as our businesses depend more on technology, use the cloud more, have more integrations, you know, we are beholden to these external corporations that are doing this. So the last bit of feedback that we wanted to collect from everybody today, if one last thing, if you want to scan that, we'd love to hear what your thoughts on today's session was. I'll get a feedback link for that as well. Just give me one moment. I'll drop that in chat. And we got a couple last things to. I don't know about you guys, but I have way too many windows open. Closing comments. Sheila, did you want to rejoin us and say any closing words? I do acknowledge we have some questions in here. I think Steve and Adam and myself we're happy to stick around for a couple minutes and chat about those questions. But just to honor and respect everybody's time, we'll do the closing comments. We'll do the draw, talk about any follow-up, and then we can do the questions after we're done that, if that makes sense for everybody.
That's great.
That's great. Okay. So thank you very much to Jesse and Steve and Adam. I think there was some great insights here on AI and how it can make your nonprofit or charity or as CPAs more efficient in our work. Certainly the importance of insurance for cyber and also the high risk of cyber breaches and the importance of having a strong cybersecurity plan. And I appreciated your comment, Jesse, that it's not a product you can install, but a practice you can instill. So I think that's good words for us all. If we can move to the next slide, which it's toward the end of the deck there of mine.
Yeah, what did you want?
Yeah,
so this one's got that
so we're gonna. Yeah, that's right. And so I think our hosts from CPA Alberta will add that link into the chat. If somebody could do that, thank you so much. Perfect. So I just want to do a brief reminder that if you're in search of some ethics hours, we have a webinar. CPA Alberta has a webinar on December 16th, and the link has been put into the chat. So please register and join for that particular item. So that is the main piece I wanted to share. And thanks again. And I'm going to turn it back to Jesse to facilitate those Q&A. I think there's a few more in the ones I directly sent you, Jesse, and also in the Q&A. If you've got those, I'll turn it back to you for a couple of minutes.
All right. Thank you. I very purposely closed as many windows as I could before we started this, and then I've just been opening more and more as we have gone. So I think what might be worthwhile is let's hop over and we will do the draw. So can we see that okay? So we loaded everybody in here, and so the draw that we're going to do now, this will be from Tier 3 IT. We will be making a $1,000 donation to the organization that is selected. we did have a chat beforehand. We need the organization to be here. So what we would ask is when we spin this, if you represent the organization that's selected, you should be able to throw something in chat to me. And so just make sure that I know how to get in touch with you. So here we go. We can all read that. The Bissell Center. So awesome. Do we have a representative from the Bissell Center on the call? And if so, Richard representing the Bissell Center. Excellent. Well, thank you for participating, for entering in that. You and I can connect and we will sort that out very soon. And it's just going to keep spinning for us. Okay. CPA announcements. We've got the ethics webinar and then kind of closing comments. So I do want to just say again, thank you to everyone at CPA Alberta. Thank you, Steve and Adam, for participating. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. It really meant a lot to us that you took time out of your day to join us, to see 270 people join us to hear about this topic is just amazing. If you would like to chat with any of us, hopefully there's a way that you can track us down. And again, if you wanted to stick around to hear any of the responses to the questions, please feel free. If you have any questions, put them in chat. If you need to sign off, we understand as well. So thanks for that. All right, I'm going to just stop my screen share and let's take a look at this. So got to scroll way up in here to get the questions. I think I saw 3 of them. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there were 3. I'm happy to read them out because
that'd
I
be
did
great.
trap those. The ones that I sent to you directly. So I think there was a question for Steve. What MS AI tool did you use to automate meeting minutes?
It's a really, really good question. We actually built a flow in what's called Power Automate, which is part of the Microsoft universe for automating flows. And then we actually ended up building in another tool called N8N, a little agent that would actually read that text and return it back. Power Automate has an AI agent, I think, on one of the Chat GPT models, but we just found it wasn't quite as robust as using N8N. But originally we did it all in Power Automate. So off the shelf, Power Automate 0365. I think you have Power Automate as a in your 365 subscription. So you can experiment. To my point, if you're taking small steps, you can experiment just with that and see what you can cook.
Okay, thank you. So the second question was for you, Jesse, regarding privacy considerations when using AI tools such as ChatGPT and Copilot. As an example, it's my understanding that any inquiries I make of Copilot as a personal subscriber to Office 365, my inquiries and responses are subject to being used for training purposes by Microsoft. While as a business subscriber, no inquiries and responses are subject to being used for training purposes. Can you comment on this aspect of privacy?
So yeah, big question, and it's a really important one to ask. And I do believe that being on a business subscription is where you want to go. ChatGPT is the back end for Microsoft Copilot. So the difference really is ChatGPT is more of a public AI versus a private data source in Copilot. Now, that being said, every one of these AI platforms has settings that are available to you. And I'll just show really quickly one thing you may all want to check. The screen share. So in your ChatGPT, if you want to go into settings and under data controls, there's an option here that says improve the model for everyone. And you want to have that slider turned off. And now I'm on a paid version here. I'm not 100% sure if it's available on the personal, but by turning that slider off, when I upload information in here, it's no longer being consumed and put into the training data for ChatGPT. And what I've noticed is that the AI platforms, when they're releasing new features, they typically turn that on by default. And the reason is that they know that if they make it an opt-out, meaning they turn it on for everyone, unless you turn it off, maybe 10% of people will go and turn this off. So 90% of people are still giving their data to ChatGPT. Whereas if they went the other way and said, well, go in and turn this slider on if you want your data to be included. I mean, I don't know, 2%, 3% of people maybe would do that. So it's a massive delta and a reason for them to do that. So LinkedIn, they have an AI engine. You have to go turn that off. Facebook has them, all that. So you definitely want to be careful about that. And I would also say one of the big things is making sure that you have a policy in your organization that says, are they allowed to use AI? Which AI tools are they allowed to use? How often are you reviewing those settings and how are you enforcing it? And, pro tip, you can go in and ChatGPT and say, I am the executive director at a small nonprofit. We're concerned about how our employees are using AI. I would like your help designing an AI acceptable use policy. And please ask me 5 questions to help design and develop the policy that we're going to create together. And you could have an AI acceptable use policy by the end of the day today.
Okay. Thanks, Jesse. Next question. Are you in the Q&A or would you like me to run through those with you?
I wasn't in the Q&A.
Okay.
They're in
Okay.
there too. I saw them in chat.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some in the chat. There's one, if you want to handle
Yeah.
those, and then there was one more in the chat that came in.
Okay. I'll chat with Piero. If you're still on the call, I hope. Sophos is one of the top-rated security solutions providers in the IT space. We use their products extensively. I want to go back to the baking analogy. Just because you have Sophos doesn't mean you can make a delicious cake. And what I mean by that is there are settings, alerts, integrations, automations, review cadences, updates. There are so many things that go into maintaining a security practice that, again, the Sophos product, I don't care as much whether you use Sophos or you use, Huntress or you use Defender or something like that. You need to understand how they're doing it. So yes, it's good, but we need to understand that process. Phishing activities using the company name or brand. That's always a tricky one. Probably too many layers to unpack on this. But if you're aware that somebody's brand is being used in phishing attacks, and you are friendly with that brand, I think it's worthwhile reaching out to them and letting them know. It could be that they haven't configured their SPF and DKIM records on their email server side of things, and they're being impersonated. It could be that they have other security risks that they need to address. If you want to connect with me, shoot me an email and we can chat more about that one, but it's pretty extensive. Adam, I don't know if you're in Q&A, but there's a question here about whether cyber insurance is relatively new. Do you see more companies getting it, and what's the growth outlook in this area?
Sure. Yeah, great question. Cyber insurance, when you say relatively new, yes. considering insurance has been around as a thing since the 1800s, and property insurance has evolved out of that. But the more traditional insurances are much older. Cyber insurance is probably 20 years old from when the first policies were written, at least here in Canada. Do I see more companies getting it? Yes. So the market was very difficult after COVID. So Jesse probably understands this better than most, but as companies started sending people home during COVID, there was this mass influx of people using remote equipment in companies that were not remote first companies. So they were giving people a laptop and saying, use your home Wi-Fi and log in. And the companies weren't set up for that. And it caused a lot of losses in the insurance market, which hardened the market where the companies were only giving insurance to the best in class risks. It was very hard to get it as a small organization. It was very expensive. And so that has started to change in the past couple of years. So the market is softening. There's more companies coming into the insurance marketplace offering cyber products. So it's quite competitive. And then there's also, it's become a board issue. So as CPAs and as nonprofits, boards, there's becoming an expectation that it is a protection that's being put in place to help manage the IT risk and the reputational risk, compliance risk. And so it is on the radar of a lot more nonprofits, smaller organizations, and coinciding with the price coming down, it's a great time to get into the market for cyber. So the growth outlook in this area is exponential. There's great product and a lot of capacity for insurance companies to write it. Great question.
Yeah. Yeah, then I see Sandra asking about, a small nonprofit with no employees. What is a minimum cost to achieve security controls around AI? And that's again a pretty loaded question, and it is a challenge that I think all smaller organizations have to deal with. Is that again, when we talk about cybersecurity being a process, a practice, not a product. The same controls that a 10 or a 30 or a 50 user organization would want to have in place is what, quite frankly, a small 1, 2, 3 person organization would want to have in place. And so going back to that illustration of the scale, you've got to strike a balance. And so, you probably need to be working with a little bit more of an ad hoc kind of service provider that you can sit and have a consultation with, get them to evaluate what you currently have, what some of the best practices are, and it's establishing that access control is really the biggest thing. Now, security control around AI, I think, is a whole different discussion. And Steve, I don't know if you have any thoughts around minimal security controls around AI specifically.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of the number one question. I think to minimize the cost, and I think Jesse, you alluded to it earlier, do the simple things first, put a policy in place, because I'm guessing, I think you said you're a solo nonprofit, so you are the only employee, but even putting a policy in place will even force yourself to think about, okay, yeah, how should I be using this? Even simple things like Jesse's point about using ChatGPT ungoverned or with it set off. The other thing is, if you're going to use ChatGPT or anything like that a lot, and even start to experiment with some of these automations around AI, I would, as quick as you could, try to push into the Microsoft environment where the model lives inside your Microsoft environment. So you're not pushing things into ChatGPT anymore. You bring ChatGPT to your data essentially, which is particularly important. Depends who's on your board, and even some of your funders. Sometimes they're asking those kind of questions now, and so and that that can be $20-30 a month, or whatever a business license is for a solo nonprofit, and give you that toolkit. So those are the things I would start, to be secure and still keep the costs down.
Awesome. Well, there's still quite a few folks in